This is pretty interesting that all charges not guilty.
It is pretty interesting because each person who was shot, the jurors had to analyze each person because each count was decided for each person. So they had to go through the first person who was shot and analyze that. Was there self-defense there, or was it an intentional act by the other person? For the first count, they believed that Kyle Rittenhouse acted in self-defense for the first person. There was another person who was shot and killed. They had to analyze that count too, and in that count too, the jurors believed self-defense there, and that's why they voted not guilty. On the third count also, there was a count against another gentleman who he wasn't killed, he was shot. However, he was facing years in prison for that one. The jurors analyzed that one and said not guilty. There was other counts too involving having the weapon and shooting the weapon and endangering others. They found him not guilty. So what the jurors are telling everybody and telling the world here is that they believe that Kyle Rittenhouse has his lawful right, Second Amendment, to having a weapon, and he used his lawful right to defend himself. So this verdict is telling not only the city of Kenosha, but everybody who's watching that they believe that Kyle Rittenhouse was in his right to self-defense during that night.
And now that we have the opportunity, now that we know what happened here with the not guilty on all of the charges, let's just go back to that day where the state had their star witness on the stand, and that was the sole survivor as he was describing what happened leading up to the shooting. And then as we look back at that day, was the case dead for the state when their star witness said he did, in fact, point the gun at Kyle Rittenhouse?
So under the law, the state has to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, meaning that if the jurors have 1% of doubt, just a small part of doubt, under the law, they can find Kyle Rittenhouse not guilty. So based upon the fact that they believe the other person pointing the gun at Kyle Rittenhouse, they might have believed that he pointed the gun at Kyle Rittenhouse first. That gave him the right to self-defense. That right there puts doubt in the juror's head. They don't know, was it Kyle Rittenhouse who fired the weapon first, or was it the other person? That can show doubt. And once you have doubt there, the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, and doubt means not guilty.
Very interesting, very interesting. Now, is there anything that the state can do? Can they file stuff now to try to get something reversed, or what happens next?
I mean, the only other option would be if the federal prosecutor got involved, because Kyle Rittenhouse came from Illinois and came into Wisconsin and tried to find some charges there federally. But it's very hard to try a person again. Under our law and our Constitution, we have what you call double jeopardy, meaning that once you face a trial and the jurors of your peers, you cannot be tried again. So the jurors have made a decision. They said not guilty. The state can always try to file motions to recharge him or file other charges than that similar to these charges. They can always do that. However, for these charges and these people, it'll be hard for the state to file and continue on with this case against Kyle Rittenhouse because of double jeopardy. And once you're tried once, you can't be tried again under our law.
All right, legal analyst Ben Taylor, we thank you for joining us here on this big news day as we had it come down. The verdict found not guilty on all charges there for Kyle Rittenhouse. We appreciate it, Ben, for your input. And we're going to keep our coverage going right here on Live Now from Fox. Everybody, let's go out to Fox 6 Milwaukee as they are going wall-to-wall coverage on this as well, as you can expect.
18-year-old, now 18-year-old, not guilty on all counts. The moment that the attorneys step to that podium, we will take that to you live.
In the meantime, let's go back to Michael Hart. Thank you so much for joining us on this very historic day for Kenosha, for anyone impacted by this case. Could you just talk about your reaction to 5 non-guilty verdicts for Kyle Rittenhouse?
Look, it was a tall order for the state. once the issue of self-defense was raised by the defense, the government had to disprove beyond a reasonable doubt that he didn't act in self-defense, and that proved at the end of the day to be too much. I will say this: I would say that the fact that there was the video of the shooting, what we don't see in most homicide cases, probably saved Kyle Rittenhouse's life.
And that really has been the key, I think, for both sides. We were just discussing that. So many different pieces of video, so many different angles to draw on there. Do you think there was any one in particular that really could have swayed the jury, one that gave them kind of their lead, their marching orders on what would eventually be 5 not guilty verdicts?
Well, you know, the image of Huber and the others attacking him with a skateboard, the fella flying at him to kick him in the head, right? That's pretty compelling stuff. Yeah, it all contributed, and the fact that he responded the way he did at the end of the day proved to be too much for the government to overcome in terms of the self-defense argument.
The not guilty verdicts, Kyle Rittenhouse now released from bond. How does Kyle Rittenhouse assimilate himself back into, the real world, essentially, with these non-guilty verdicts?
Well, that's a fair question. I mean, Rittenhouse is a name probably not much different from Lewinsky. He's going to have to, live. People know who Kyle Rittenhouse is around the country and, for that matter, around the world. He'll be saddled with that, and assimilating back into the community will be a challenge. But life goes on, and hopefully he learned from the experience. It will guide him going forward in the choices and decisions he makes. Maybe he's emboldened. I don't know, but this is the first day of the rest of his life.
We're sort of processing this all in the moment, and we'll be able to take a look back and evaluate things over the coming hours and days and weeks, I'm sure. But very quickly, or at least in your initial reaction to the verdict, where did the prosecution not succeed? What were they not able to prove, and were there elements of their case or witnesses they brought to the stand that you did not think were ultimately effective in swaying the jury?
Well, the prosecution doesn't really get to pick its witnesses. The facts are the facts. I always commented from the beginning of the trial that each and every witness didn't seem to hurt the defense that much. So the prosecution brings forth the witnesses who saw and heard and observed and presented to the jury. I'm not sure the prosecution failed. They made some minor tactical errors. Certainly there were questions about Mr. Binger's arguments to the jury, which could be second guessed. Fair enough, but at the end of the day, the facts were what was presented, and the jury found that there was a lacking of evidence beyond a reasonable doubt to prove it, and that's the basis of the verdict. I have great faith in jurors, and I think that they took their time. They were deliberate. He had 5 or 6 counts to deal with, 5 counts, I guess, at the end. And a lot of evidence and testimony to get through.
Michael, I want to draw your attention to the fact Kyle Rittenhouse was charged initially with 7 counts. 2 of those dropped: the possession of a dangerous weapon and also the charge over the emergency order violating the curfew. If those still were on the table against him, could that have made a difference? Could he have even gotten a little bit of jail time or some sort of repercussion if those were on the table? What is your sense?
The sense is maybe, but this is a homicide trial. So if those charges remained and he was convicted of the misdemeanors and he did a handful of days or a handful of months in jail, I'm not sure there would have been any greater satisfaction for the prosecution or those